For as long as I can remember, one ritual in Grandma's house never changed. Every night, exactly at 2:17 a.m., she would rise from her bed, move silently down the hall, and turn off a single light in the living room. Not all the lights, not some, just one, always the same. When asked why, she never answered. If pressed, she would only smile, shake her head slightly, and whisper, "It's for them." As children, we thought it was superstition, a quirky habit of age, maybe even a hallucination we collectively imagined. But as years passed, the habit didn't fade. If anything, it grew more deliberate. The precision unnerved me more than I could admit. The timing never wavered. The hand she used, always her right, moved like clockwork, almost as if some invisible timer dictated her actions. I remember the nights I tried to watch, pretending to sleep but peeking from the edge of the blanket. Her movements were methodical, deliberate, and hauntingly quiet. She didn't stumble. She didn't hesitate. She didn't breathe loudly. Just a soft shuffle of slippers across carpet, her hand brushing the wall for balance, until finally, she reached the switch and flipped it off. Then, like a ghost, she returned to bed without a sound, leaving the house plunged into a semi-darkness that felt almost alive. By the time the rest of the house realized, it was already done. The ritual felt sacred, untouchable, and deeply mysterious. I tried asking her once, when I was older and less intimidated, "Grandma, why that light? Why, every night?" Her eyes, always sharp despite her age, met mine with intensity. "They need it," she said softly. That was all. No further explanation. The words made my stomach twist. They was always plural, she never clarified who. And the way she spoke made it feel urgent, critical, as though failure to comply would trigger consequences beyond understanding. Over time, I realized that curiosity in Grandma's house was dangerous. Questions were answered sparingly, or not at all. The rest of the family ignored it. They were accustomed to Grandma's idiosyncrasies. Lights flicked off, clocks adjusted, doors locked at odd hours. But I watched. And as the years passed, I began to notice other patterns. Certain rooms she never entered after sunset. Drawers she refused to open. Some nights, I would see her pause mid-hallway, listening, as if some invisible presence spoke to her from the shadows. The 2:17 a.m. ritual was not random. It was connected to every other precaution, every whisper, every silence she maintained throughout the house. Somehow, the light was a signal, a shield, or perhaps a warning. One night, curiosity overcame caution. I quietly followed her into the living room, careful not to make a sound. I froze when I saw her pause before the lamp she always switched off. There was nothing supernatural, nothing obvious. Just her hand hovering in the air, her gaze fixed on the empty space in the corner. She didn't flick the switch yet. She whispered something I couldn't hear. And then, finally, the light went out. The room plunged into darkness, but I felt watched. The air itself seemed heavier, thick with anticipation, as if the house and something beyond it were waiting. I realized then that Grandma's habit wasn't about the light itself. It was about the presence she managed, controlled, or perhaps held at bay. I tried to ignore it, tried to convince myself it was old age and superstition. But deep down, I knew better. Grandma never wasted movements. She never acted without reason. Every step, every gesture, every 2:17 a.m. moment had purpose. And the weight of that realization pressed down on me as the years went on. Until the night she didn't get up. Until she died, quietly, in her sleep, leaving the ritual unfinished. That's when we discovered the truth. And the reason why the light mattered was far beyond anything we could have imagined. The morning after Grandma passed, the house felt empty in a way that went beyond absence. The familiar creaks, the subtle hum of appliances, even the faint scent of her perfume in the hallway, it was all gone. But something lingered. That corner in the living room where she always turned off the light felt heavier, almost as if the air itself remembered her presence. I couldn't shake the memory of the countless nights I had watched her glide across the floor with such precision, and the realization hit me. the ritual had been more than habit. It had been protection. I began looking around, piecing together clues from years of observation. The light she turned off wasn't random. It illuminated a section of the living room where the carpet was subtly worn, where the furniture was arranged with odd precision. Beneath that corner, there was a trapdoor, one we had never noticed because Grandma had always kept it hidden under a thick rug. My hands shook as I lifted the edge of the rug. The hinges were old, slightly rusted, but perfectly maintained. Something had been hidden there all along. And the thought of what might be underneath made my heart hammer against my ribs. It wasn't just a chest, or papers, or ordinary belongings. What lay beneath that floor was evidence of secrets so dangerous, so meticulously guarded, that no one in the family had ever suspected it existed. Grandma had spent decades keeping it concealed, night after night performing the same ritual, ensuring it remained untouched, undiscovered. Suddenly, the 2:17 a.m. switch made sense. Turning off the light wasn't for energy or convenience. It was a signal. Darkness concealed her movements, masked her intentions, and ensured the secret remained sealed until the right moment. I called my siblings, trying to explain, but they dismissed it as the imagination of someone grieving. "It's just Grandma being weird," they said. But I knew the truth. And I knew the secret wasn't something that could wait. Carefully, I removed the floor panel, bracing myself for what we had buried there. Inside, wrapped in layers of fabric and old boxes, was a collection of documents, photographs, and a small locked case. The documents were legal papers, notes written in Grandma's precise hand, and photographs showing people I didn't recognize, places I had never visited. Each item had dates marked beside them, spanning decades. The case was the heaviest thing of all. Small, rusted at the edges, but unyielding. Grandma had carried the combination in her memory alone. I realized that if anyone had broken it open without her knowledge, the consequences could have been catastrophic. And that's when it hit me. She had been protecting someone. Or something. Something dangerous enough that leaving it exposed even for a minute could have invited disaster. Every night, every precise movement at 2:17 a.m., every silent step across the carpet, it had all been part of a long, silent battle to guard this secret. I finally understood why she had never explained, why she never spoke of the light, and why the house had always felt like it was alive, watching, waiting. Grandma hadn't been eccentric. She had been vigilant. She had been a guardian. And now, with her gone, the responsibility to understand and protect that secret fell entirely on me. I knew that whatever was inside that case would change everything we thought we knew about her and about our family. And as I sat there staring at the small, locked box beneath the floor, I realized I was standing at the edge of a truth far darker and more dangerous than I had ever imagined. I couldn't sleep that night. The house was silent, yet every creak and whisper of air felt amplified. The small, locked case beneath the floor seemed to hum with quiet importance, as if it knew it had finally been noticed. I sat cross-legged on the living room carpet, staring at it, debating what to do next. My mind raced with possibilities. Was it documents? Money? Evidence of something illegal? Or something far more dangerous? Every scenario made my stomach churn. Grandma had protected it for decades, and now, without her, the burden had fallen on me. By morning, I gathered courage and examined the photographs spread around the case. Faces I didn't recognize stared back, their expressions frozen in time, some joyful, some fearful, all somehow connected to the papers Grandma had kept meticulously. There were letters, too, carefully folded, dated, and addressed to names I had never heard. Each one seemed to carry weight, not just personal correspondence, but instructions, warnings, confessions. Reading them made me realize the breadth of what Grandma had been protecting. It wasn't just a secret about the past. It was a web of people, events, and decisions whose consequences could reach into the present. I tried to make sense of the timeline. Names, dates, and addresses painted a picture of careful planning. Grandma had been tracking someone or perhaps a group of people for decades. The nighttime ritual, the precise 2:17 a.m. movement, the floorboard concealment, it wasn't just about keeping an object hidden. It was about timing, observation, and control. Whoever or whatever this involved was still relevant, still dangerous, still needing protection. The weight of her vigilance pressed down on me, heavier than I ever imagined. The more I read, the more I realized why she had never let anyone into her routine. This wasn't simply personal. It wasn't even about the house. It was about preserving lives. Some of the names she had written in those letters were now elderly. Some had long passed. But the instructions she left, they were alive, active, and urgent. One wrong move and decades of careful concealment could collapse in an instant. I understood for the first time that Grandma's nightly habit wasn't about fear of the dark. It was fear of exposure, fear of failure, fear of letting consequences unfold that she had worked so hard to contain. That night, I lay awake again, haunted by the idea that every creak of the floor, every whisper of wind through the cracked window pane, could be a signal. The 2:17 a.m. ritual wasn't just a habit. It was a shield, a warning system, a measure of control against something that never slept. I realized I was now part of it, part of the vigilance, part of the chain of responsibility that Grandma had carried alone for decades. And with that understanding came dread, because the moment I moved the case, even slightly, I felt it, eyes on me. Not physical eyes, but the weight of history, of expectation, of threat, pressing down like a tangible force. By the next evening, I had made a decision. I would open the case. Carefully. Methodically. But before I did, I documented everything, copied the papers, photographed the letters, and arranged the photographs as they had been originally. Grandma had left clues for a reason, and I was beginning to see a pattern. The ritual, the timing, the secrecy, it all pointed to a sequence that needed to be followed exactly. Deviate from it, and the consequences could ripple far beyond the walls of the house. As I finally lifted the lid, I felt a shiver run down my spine. The air seemed to thicken. Inside, there were more letters, a small metal key, and a single notebook, its pages yellowed, edges frayed, and handwriting unmistakably Grandma's. Each entry read like a journal, but more like instructions, warnings, and confessions intertwined. And then I saw the last entry, written just days before she died, and my heart nearly stopped. It was a warning directed at me, a message that made everything I had thought I understood about Grandma, her habits, and her nightly rituals suddenly terrifyingly clear. The notebook was heavier than I expected, not in weight, but in gravity. Each page carried decades of careful thought, written in Grandma's precise, deliberate hand. She had documented everything, the timing of events, the people involved, the threats that lingered long after any physical danger had passed. And then I saw it, the first mention of the light. At 2:17 a.m., the ritual began decades ago, not as superstition, but as a measure of control. The light marked a point in time that aligned with schedules she had tracked meticulously. Someone or something had once come for her family, for the people she cared about, and she had devised a system to protect them, a system so exact that 1 minute's deviation could have been catastrophic. Among the letters and photographs, I discovered envelopes addressed to people I had never met, notes warning them of danger, and instructions to do or avoid certain things at specific times. Grandma had spent her life not just shielding a secret but orchestrating protection, carefully balancing trust and caution. Each night at 2:17 a.m., the light was a signal, a shield, a ritual that reinforced the barriers she had built. For decades, she had walked this fine line alone, ensuring no one could misstep, no one could stumble upon the truth too early. She had kept the weight of responsibility on her shoulders, never sharing it because sharing would have risked everything. The key was the final piece. Attached to a small, locked compartment within the notebook itself, it led to a hidden drawer beneath the living room carpet, the very spot she had always moved toward at 2:17 a.m. Inside, I found documents of unimaginable significance, evidence linking dangerous individuals, maps, coded instructions, and even personal letters that revealed betrayals and secrets I never imagined existed. The gravity of it all hit me like a wave. Grandma had known the world beyond these walls was perilous, that exposure could destroy lives. And she had dedicated every night, every precise movement, to keeping that danger contained. Reading her last message made my hands tremble. If I fail, everything falls apart. If you fail, the past becomes the present, and some things cannot be undone. Follow the ritual. Do not break it. Protect them. Her words were as chilling as they were clear. The threat she had kept at bay for decades had never vanished. It had only been waiting, patient, silent, for the next guardian to assume the role. And now that guardian was me. I realized then why her death felt heavier than loss should feel. She hadn't left us grieving for her absence. She had left us responsible for a burden that demanded vigilance, calculation, and courage. I wasn't just inheriting a house. I was inheriting decades of careful protection, a ritual that had saved lives, and the unrelenting weight of knowledge that mistakes could be deadly. The 2:17 a.m. light was no longer just a habit.
It was a lifeline.
A warning. A shield. And as the clock ticked closer to that hour, I understood that the ritual was now mine to perform. Standing in the living room that night, I felt the gravity of Grandma's presence. Not as a ghost, not as memory, but as a guide, a silent mentor whose life had been a testament to patience, precision, and unwavering protection. I reached for the light switch at 2:17 a.m., my hand trembling, aware of every creak of the floor, every shadow in the corners, every consequence that had been carefully held at bay. When the bulb flicked off, I felt a strange calm wash over me, a connection spanning decades. Grandma's life, her vigilance, her fear, and her courage were now a part of me. And I knew, without doubt, that the secret she had protected so fiercely would remain safe, for now, until the next guardian was ready. The days after I assumed Grandma's ritual felt surreal. The house was alive in ways I had never noticed before, almost like it recognized a new guardian had taken her place. Every creak of the floor, every subtle whisper of wind through the curtains, carried meaning. The living room light, the one she had turned off every night at 2:17 a.m., had become my anchor. I learned to move like she did, silently, deliberately, understanding the rhythm she had maintained for decades. It wasn't just about keeping a light off. It was about holding time, memory, and danger in balance. I started noticing things I never had before. Slight misalignments in furniture. Dust patterns disturbed in ways that hinted someone or something had been here. A shadow in the corner that never belonged. The hidden drawer, the key, and the letters had taught me more than the ritual alone ever could. Grandma had known threats beyond comprehension, forces most would dismiss as coincidence or imagination. And she had prepared for them all, silently, night after night, so no harm would come to those she loved. Now, the burden of vigilance rested on me. At first, the weight was unbearable. Every sound, every movement, every thought carried the responsibility of her lifetime. But slowly, I began to understand her mindset. Patience, observation, timing,
Control.
each small action, the careful shutting of the light, the adjustment of the furniture, the checking of the hidden compartment, was part of a system she had perfected. And I was learning to trust it, to follow it,
To honor it.
The fear remained, but it was tempered by understanding. Months passed. I continued the ritual every night at 2:17 a.m., aware that someone, somewhere, might be watching, waiting, or testing the line she had drawn decades ago. I no longer questioned the significance of a light. It wasn't just a signal. It was a shield, a boundary between safety and chaos, between the living and the hidden forces that Grandma had contained. And with each night, I felt her presence less as absence and more as guidance, a mentor whose lessons extended beyond life. Eventually, I accepted that some things are never meant to be fully understood. Secrets, responsibilities, burdens, they exist to protect, to warn, and to preserve. The ritual, the letters, the light, they were all part of a larger truth that only those willing to guard it could survive. And in that realization, I found clarity, calm, and purpose. Grandma's life had been her secret. Her death had been the passing of the torch. And the house, with all its creaks, shadows, and whispers, was no longer hers alone. It was ours.
Meaning.
The light would continue to turn off at 2:17 a.m., and I would never forget why. Because some truths are too dangerous to reveal. Some secrets demand guardians. And some rituals, no matter how small, can save lives in ways no one can imagine until it's too late.